I never thought I'd be the person who gets revenge on family, but here we are. Buckle up, this story's a wild ride. A few months back, my younger brother, Mike, always the family favorite, showed up at my door looking like his world was ending. He gave me this whole sob story about not being able to pay rent, utilities about to be shut off, the works. He swore up and down he'd pay me back as soon as he got back on his feet. Thing is, I've helped Mike before. His track record for paying people back, absolute garbage. But I'm an idiot who believes in family, so I gave him $5,000, not pocket change. I actually dipped into my emergency savings to help him, thinking I was keeping him from being homeless. Fast forward to family dinner night. We're all sitting around eating when Dad casually asks Mike, "So how's that new car treating you?" "Wait, what car?" Mike just smirks and shrugs. "Oh yeah, I got a new ride, 2023 model, all the bells and whistles." He says it so casually while I'm sitting there in shock. Then Mom, completely clueless about what's happening, starts gushing about how Mike deserves something nice after everything he's been through. My jaw hit the floor. "You bought a new car?" I probably yelled it. Mike just shrugs again. "Yeah, found a good deal, payments aren't too bad, needed an upgrade." I felt my blood pressure rising. With what money, Mike? This fool has the nerve to smirk at me and say, "Well, technically I used the money you lent me, but don't worry, I'll pay you back, eventually." I swear my brain short-circuited. "You spent my loan on a new car." The table goes dead silent. My parents look uncomfortable. Mom gives me this "don't start drama" look. Dad sighs like I'm being difficult. Then Mom actually says, "Honey, you shouldn't have given him money if you weren't okay with how he spent it." Are you kidding me? I look at Mike, who's just sitting there looking smug as hell, eating his dinner like this is all some big joke. Then Mike, feeling untouchable at this point, laughs and says, "Come on, you've got a good job. $5,000 isn't a big deal to you." I didn't say another word through dinner, but in my head, I was already planning how to make him regret every smug word that came out of his mouth. See, Mike might be entitled, but he's not bright. He bought the car on a loan he hadn't even made the first payment on yet, and I was about to make sure he felt the consequences of his actions. After dinner, I went home absolutely furious. I felt like such a fool for trusting Mike, and even worse knowing my parents were letting him get away with it. But instead of exploding, I decided to be strategic. I wasn't just going to yell at him, I was going to make him truly regret what he'd done. First, I needed to figure out how he even got the car. Mike was terrible with money, always late on rent, dodging bills, borrowing from anyone who'd give him cash. There's no way he suddenly had enough for a new car. So I started digging. I knew he must have taken out a loan. No dealership would let someone with his financial history drive off the lot otherwise. But Mike's credit was awful. How did he get approved? Then it hit me. Mike wasn't clever enough to figure out complicated financial workarounds. He must have had a cosigner, and there was only one person foolish enough to do that for him, our dad. Dad always had a soft spot for Mike. I could work my butt off, save money, be responsible, and it wouldn't matter. Mike could mess up over and over, and my parents would always bail him out. What surprised me was how careless Dad had been. By co-signing that loan, he wasn't just vouching for Mike, he was legally responsible for it. If Mike missed even one payment, the bank would come after Dad next. That's when I knew exactly how to get my money back. I waited 2 weeks, didn't mention the loan, didn't bring up the car, didn't talk about money at all. I wanted Mike to think I'd given up and moved on, and just when he was getting comfortable, I made my move. First, I called the bank. I didn't do anything illegal, but I asked some very specific questions about what happens when a cosigner realizes they've made a mistake. I might have accidentally mentioned that Mike had a history of financial irresponsibility and a habit of blowing through large amounts of cash. Banks don't like hearing things like that. I could hear the concern in the loan officer's voice. They told me they'd be reviewing his account. Then I took things further. Mike was careless with his personal information. He used the same passwords for everything, and I knew way more about his accounts than he realized. I didn't steal anything, I'm not that reckless, but I did make a few adjustments. His car insurance, I might have updated some details, just enough to significantly raise his monthly premium. Nothing crazy, just enough to hurt. But the best part came when I had a little talk with Dad. I wasn't aggressive. I just calmly explained that if Mike missed even one payment, the bank wouldn't chase Mike for the money, they'd come after him. Dad went pale. For the first time, I think he truly understood what a mistake he'd made. And that's when everything started falling apart for Mike. A week later, I got an angry call from him. The bank had contacted him about changes to his loan status, and he was furious. He screamed about how I'd ruined his life and was meddling in his business. He ranted about his insurance costs skyrocketing and how he was getting calls about potential loan adjustments. Then, in the middle of his rant, he slipped up. "You had no right to mess with my loan. I was going to make the payments. I just needed more time before the first one was due." I froze. Mike hadn't even made his first payment yet. The bank already saw him as a risk. I realized I didn't need to take his car. The bank was about to do it for me. I could barely hide my satisfaction. Mike had no idea how deep in trouble he was. If the bank was already watching him before his first payment was even due, things were about to get very interesting. I played dumb. "Wait, you haven't paid anything yet. That's weird because usually when you get a car loan, they expect you to, start paying for it." Mike stammered and backpedaled. Things just got complicated. I had to take care of other stuff first." Right, other stuff. Translation. He'd probably blown through the rest of my money on nonsense and was now facing the reality that responsibility isn't optional. But banks don't care about excuses. They don't care if you're gonna pay. They want results, and Mike had none. Neither did Dad. Not even an hour later, Dad called me. "What the hell did you do?" His voice was tight with anger. "The bank just called me. They're saying there's a problem with Mike's loan. They're asking if I want to." He couldn't even finish the sentence. I leaned back in my chair, playing innocent. "A problem? Huh, that's weird." Dad wasn't having it. "Don't. I know you had something to do with this. You've been holding a grudge ever since that stupid dinner." "Oh, so I was holding a grudge." I kept my voice calm. "I don't know what you're talking about. I just think it's interesting that you'd toss in a loan for someone with Mike's track record. Really makes you liable for his mistakes, doesn't it?" Silence, then Dad inhaled sharply. "Fix it." I laughed. "Fix it, me? Dad, I'm not the one in a financial mess. You are." "That's not how this works," he snapped. "You don't screw over your family." That made my blood boil. "No, Dad, Mike screwed over his family. He screwed over me. I tried to help him and he threw it in my face. You want someone to blame? Look at him." Dad started arguing, but I didn't have the energy. I hung up. 3 days later, Mike called again. This time he wasn't just angry, he was desperate. "The bank, they're saying they might take the car," he stammered. "They're telling me I need to make an immediate payment or—" I could hear the panic in his voice, and it was satisfying. I let the silence hang for a moment, enjoying that he was finally facing consequences. "You should have thought about this before buying a car you couldn't afford," I said coolly. "Before taking money from me you never planned to repay." Mike's breath caught. "Look, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was planning to pay you back, okay? Just help me out, please. I'll pay you back as soon as I can, I swear." His desperation was growing, but I felt nothing. I was beyond sympathy. "You're begging now, but where was this when you were spending my money on a car you can't afford? Where was this when I was asking for the money you promised me?" He was quiet for a second. "I made a mistake. I know I messed up, but I just need more time, please." I smirked. "More time? Funny how that works. You keep promising more time, but my money's been sitting in your pocket while you keep not paying me back. The bank doesn't care about your more time, Mike. They care about getting their money, and right now that car is their payment." Mike became frantic. "No, no, no, they can't take it. I need that car. It's the only way I can get to work. It's the only thing I've got left." I could hear the raw fear in his voice. It was almost delicious. "Oh, I get it now," I said, playing understanding. "You don't want to lose the car, you need it, but you never thought things through. You never cared how this would affect anyone else. You've just been using people and now it's catching up to you." He was stammering, barely forming words. "I'm not using you, I swear. I need help, please, I'll fix it. I'll do anything, just don't let them take it." For a moment I almost felt bad. Almost. Then I remembered how I'd been the one to help him, how I'd given him money he never intended to repay, how quick he was to take but never to give back. "Mike," I said slowly, "I think it's too late for that. You had your chance. Now you're going to face the consequences." He didn't speak, but I could hear him breathing hard, desperately trying to find a way out. "You know what?" I continued, lowering my voice like sharing a secret. "I think it's better if I handle this for you. I'll make sure that car gets taken. That way you won't have to worry about paying for something you can't afford. The bank won't care about your excuses. They'll take it the second you slip up. After a long silence, he whispered, you wouldn't do that to me. But I could hear the doubt in his voice, and that's when I knew I had him. Mike was practically whispering now. Please don't do this. I can't lose the car. I swear I'll pay you back. I will. Just don't let them take it. I leaned forward, tapping my finger against the phone. The tension was thick enough to cut. Mike, you're not listening. I gave you plenty of chances. You were too busy buying a car you couldn't afford while I was asking for a little responsibility. I warned you. Now you're asking me to bail you out? Again, it's not happening. I paused, letting my words sink in, hearing him struggle for a response. You've already messed up, I continued coldly. The bank won't care about your sob story. They'll take the car, and there's nothing you or I can do to stop it now. It's already in motion. There was a long silence. I could hear his shallow, uneven breathing, a sound I never thought I'd enjoy. But now, it felt like victory. He had no more moves to play. He'd backed himself into a corner. I'll make a payment today, Mike finally said, his voice shaking. Just give me a chance to get the money together. I can do it. I nearly laughed. Mike, you've been saying that for months. You expect me to believe you'll have it today? No, it's too late. Please, he begged. I can't lose this car. I need it to get to work, to get my life together. Don't make them take it. I'll do anything. I realized how desperate he was. The guy who casually borrowed my money and ignored his debt was now completely at my mercy. No, I said sharply. You know what? I'll handle this. I'll make sure everything goes according to plan. What do you mean by that? His voice was frantic. You can't just leave me like this. Oh, I can, I replied, a dark smile spreading across my face. And I will. I hung up without another word. The next morning, Dad texted me. Mike says you've been messing with his loan. What did you do? I smirked but didn't reply immediately. I was already setting things in motion. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about teaching Mike a lesson he wouldn't forget. I didn't respond to Dad. Instead, I watched the notifications on my phone, each one more urgent than the last. Mike was in full panic mode, calling repeatedly, sending desperate texts begging for help. I didn't care anymore. I'd made my decision. By the time I got to the bank, Mike had called again, but I ignored it. The bank manager, a no-nonsense woman named Karen, was expecting me. I'd made arrangements earlier. We've already begun processing the repossession, she said, flipping through papers. Once payments aren't made, we follow protocol, but we can always expedite the process. I nodded, barely containing my satisfaction. The car would be gone, and Mike would face the consequences. That afternoon, Mike called again. His voice was different, quiet, broken. What did you do? He asked, trembling. I smiled. I did what I had to do, Mike. You never learned. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to mess things up. Please stop them from taking it. I'll figure this out. I will pay you back. I heard raw desperation in his voice. Then something unexpected, his voice cracked. I can't lose it, he pleaded. I just wanted something good for once. I'm sorry. I messed up. I need that car. The vulnerability in his voice hit me harder than expected, but I couldn't back down. You never cared about the people who helped you, I said steadily. You never thought about consequences. You just take and take and take. Now here we are. There's no turning back. He was silent, then I heard it, the sound of him crying. Please don't let them take it, Mike sobbed. I'm begging you, I can't lose it, not like this. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the situation. I expected anger, maybe fight, not this breakdown. I gave you chances, Mike. You had your time, you think I don't care. I do, but you never learned. You had everything handed to you and you threw it all away. Another sob escaped him. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't know what to do. I didn't think you'd. Yeah, well, you should have thought about that before buying a car you couldn't afford. I cut him off coldly. His crying grew louder. Part of me felt I was going too far, but the other part, the part that had been pushed too many times, felt relief. I'd finally taken control. I'm sorry, Mike. This is your lesson. You're going to learn what happens when you make promises you can't keep. Just before ending the call, I heard his voice one last time, barely audible through tears. Please don't do this, please. I hung up and watched the hours pass, feeling powerful and relieved. I knew this wasn't over. When the tow truck arrived at his driveway, Mike would come to me again, begging for mercy. But he didn't need mercy, he needed accountability. The next morning, I had dozens of missed calls from Mike and messages from Dad. I didn't care. The bank confirmed it. Mike's car was gone. Repossession complete. A strange calm washed over me like a weight had lifted. I didn't hear from Mike for a while. I imagined him packing his empty driveway, staring at the spot where his car used to be, realizing he'd lost not just the car, but his last chance for respect. That evening, I got a long voicemail from him. His voice was quiet, but I could hear anger beneath the surface. "You really did it. You took it. I don't even know what to say. You said you were going to help me, and now it's gone. Everything's gone. I hate you. You ruined me." I almost felt bad, but knew this was the only way he'd learn. For once, he needed to face consequences. That night, Dad called, furious. "What the hell did you do to Mike's car? He says you had it repossessed. He's devastated." "I didn't do anything he didn't deserve," I said steadily. "He never learns. Every time I help him, he messes up again. I gave him every chance. It's not my fault he can't take responsibility." After a long pause, Dad sighed. "I get it. I really do, but I don't think you realize how bad this is for him." "Maybe he needs to realize that himself," I replied. "Maybe he needs to hit rock bottom before he can climb back up." The next few weeks were awkward. Mike avoided me completely. I could tell he was struggling. Finally, he came to me looking completely defeated, eyes red from crying. "I get it now," he whispered, his voice small. "I should have listened to you. I'm sorry, I really am." Just like that, I saw the change in him. Maybe losing everything was what it took for him to learn. I didn't give him money this time, but I could see he was learning, slowly. Sometimes revenge isn't about getting back at someone. Sometimes it's about making them realize their mistakes and forcing them to take responsibility. And for once, I felt like I'd done just that. What do you think? Was I too harsh? Or did Mike finally get what he deserved?